All right, Phil here with another update from the 2018 Creative Cloud version of Premiere Pro. This update is all about the Essential Graphics panel and what's new with it. They've made a lot of cool changes that make it a little bit more intuitive, a little bit more advanced, and just some things that they should have added when they created it the first time. One of the first things you'll notice from the last time I created a tutorial is that they have a number of new graphic packages and templates that you can use. News, sports package, video gaming. You can go into any of these folders and take any of these graphics and just pop them into any project. And it's going to load, and if you don't have the right font, it's going to ask you to sync up with what font they're using. And if you have a Creative Cloud account or an Adobe account and the font is free, you should be able to just sync it up through that menu. So now we have these really advanced sort of graphics, and if you open them up in the Edit tab of the Essential Graphics panel, you can make all of your changes to the actual type or font or colors here. Pretty cool, right? Another is with editing multiple layers within a project. So let me actually just take in this basic lower third graphic. So we have your name text, your second line there. And so if I open this up, and the first thing you'll notice is actually I can select multiple layers, both layers, right within my program window. Before I would have to move one and then the second line one at a time, which was really difficult, especially if you had things aligned and you just couldn't do this, which is obvious. I should be able to select both of these, which is cool now. So I can select both of these layers, move them around wherever I want. The other thing that I can do is pin layers to other layers. So for example, if I select the second line here layer, you'll notice that in the Edit tab, we have this new responsive design position option with this pin to option. And you can choose, do you want to pin it to another layer or to the video frame itself? And if you choose the video frame, what's cool is that it will be responsive if you change the video frame. For example, if you make it a square for some social media video or whatever. But I'm going to choose your name here. And the next thing you have to do is choose one of these pin options. You can pin it to the top, the right, the bottom, or the left of this layer. Or you can pin it to all. So if I select pin to all, what that means is now if I change anything with the your name text, say I move it around, if I move it left, right, if we move it up or down, the bottom layer that's pinned to it will also be affected. So let's make it bigger, which is kind of cool. Oh, yeah, actually you can see some issues there with it being bigger and being pinned to. It's going to also be a little bit wonky, so you got to be careful of that. But let's go back to our second layer and let's actually turn off pin to all and let's just pin to the top. So now if I take your name here layer, if I move it left or right, nothing happens. But if I move it up or down, it's pinned to that sort of like the top of the layer. So it's a pretty cool thing, and I especially see this as useful with things like lower thirds or titles, cards, or graphics where you have multiple layers in it. Not just text layers, but also shape layers. You could pin a shape layer to the text and it will expand, get smaller, bigger if you change the size of the text, or vice versa. You could pin the text to the shape layer, and when the shape layer increases in size or changes position, the text will match that. Pretty cool, right? Another of my favorite features is in the text dropdown, you now have previews of all the fonts, which this was available in Photoshop and After Effects, and now it's available in Premiere Pro in the Essential Graphics panel, which is just great because unless you have your fonts memorized, you're not going to really know what it's going to look like. So you have this preview here, and you have this favoriting thing. So you have your this favoriting thing. It's a star. It's a favorite star. And all you have to do is favorite your different fonts. So let's just say I love this Olivier font, and I can choose star it. And then up here, I can filter by showing my favorites. So you can keep all of your favorites easily accessible. This is something that I haven't seen before in any of the Adobe Suite products, and I really love because I hate having to scroll through to a font that's at the end of the alphabet. So that's pretty cool. That's a text option. And then the last thing I'm going to mention, which I really love, is the responsive design time feature. So you get to that if you go to, on your effects controls panel, if you click for example, time remapping. You now have this responsive design time feature over here. What this means is if you add any motion to your graphic, you can actually make it responsive to the beginning or end of this clip. And the best way that I can kind of explain that is just to show you. So say I want this text to pop into the screen right here. What I can do is take my your name text right around here, about half a second. Let's set a keyframe for position. Then at the very beginning, let's drop it down. And now since the second line is pinned to that top text, it moves as well. Now let's go to the very end and set a keyframe right about a second or half a second from the end of this clip. And then at the end of the clip, let's just drag it down. So now it pops on and pops off. And if that was confusing, I encourage you to watch my other essential graphics tutorial, which shows you how to add things like motion to your text. Okay, so that's cool. But before, what would happen is I have this title up here, but it's on a little bit too long. And if I want to make it shorter, naturally what I would do is take the end of this graphic and drag it to the left, right? But what happens when I do that? Well, when I do that, the keyframes that I had added are cut off as well. So I have to extend this, and then I have to move these keyframes, or the opposite. If I want to make it longer by dragging this to the right, the keyframes stay where I set them, which is good for some instances, but when you're trying to make graphics shorter or longer, it's not that beneficial. So let's go back and set the end of our graphic right where that last keyframe is. And now let's set the intro duration of our graphic to, we could be exact and go to that keyframe. So that's 16. So let's go to 16. And you'll notice when I do that, it highlights this area on the timeline up here. Now for the outro duration, let's just put it in 1 second. So let me show you what that looks like. So now that highlights a second, and I can edit the length of this sort of intro or outro duration up here. Now what that means is if I edit the length of this graphic, shorter or longer, everything within that sort of intro and outro duration is sort of pinned to the end or the start of that clip. So you see here, if I make it longer, the outro animation stays at the end of the graphic. Awesome, right? It just makes it a lot more efficient. I don't have to do 2 steps now where I would have to change the length of the graphic and change where the keyframes are. Now I can just change the length of the graphic down here, and any sort of animation you have with keyframes in your effects controls panel will be covered with this intro and outro duration. So that includes scale, rotation, opacity, all kinds of stuff. One last thing I'm going to mention is that they have this new roll feature, which is great for end credits. Let's just delete this layer, and then let's just add a new graphic text. So let me just copy this a few times, put it. Okay. Before, if we wanted to create our custom end roll credits, we'd have to do that with the position keyframes. Now we have this roll checkbox under responsive design. So check that on, and automatically it creates this rolling credits. And to make it shorter or longer, or faster or slower, we can just make this graphic shorter or longer. The longer it is, the slower it will go. You also have your pre-roll, post-roll options. If you want it to be black for longer before the text rolls through the screen, you just add a pre-roll. If you want it to stay black for a little while longer, then you just add a post-roll. And then if you want it to ease in and out, meaning that it's going to slow into this speed, so let me just make this a little bit shorter so you can really see what that looks like. So let's just add an easy ease in, ease out. So what this means is it's not going to roll through at the same speed the whole time. It kind of slows into it. You can see that it gets faster as it goes through, and then it slows down. For end credits, I typically don't have any easing, so I won't use this, but hey, you might need that for something. So that's a lot that you can do with this new Essential Graphics panel, or with the old Essential Graphics panel, but with the updates. We covered the rolling credits. We covered the responsive design time feature. We covered how you can now choose fonts more easily with favoriting. We covered the responsive design position and all of the new graphic assets or templates that you have in the browse feature. Cool. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in another video helping you learn Adobe Premiere Pro.